Captain Minho pressed his back against the twisted steel beam, feeling the cold metal dig into his spine. His uniform was torn and bloodied, and smoke filled his lungs with every breath. Around him, the ruins of what used to be Seoul stretched. Endlessly, buildings reduced to skeletal frames, streets cratered beyond recognition. The sky above glowed an unnatural red from the fires that had been burning for weeks. He could hear them coming. The Velthrans moved with mechanical precision, their crystalline bodies catching the light from the flames. They were beautiful in a terrifying way, like living gemstones that had learned to kill. Their war machines floated overhead, humming with deadly energy that made his teeth ache. Every few seconds, another blast would light up the darkness, followed by the screams of his remaining soldiers. Minho counted the voices in his head. 12 men and women left from what had once been humanity's greatest army. 12 people standing between Earth and total extinction. The thought should have terrified him, but instead he felt strangely calm. Maybe this was what acceptance felt like. Lieutenant Sung-woo's voice crackled through his damaged radio headset. "Captain, they've got us surrounded on 3 sides. We can't hold this position much longer." The young man's voice shook, but he was still trying to sound professional. Minho remembered when Sung-woo had first joined his unit 3 years ago, fresh-faced and eager to prove himself. Now his face was scarred and his eyes held the hollow look of someone who had seen too much death. "Hold your ground, soldier," Minho replied, though they both knew it was pointless. "Make every shot count." Through the smoke, Minho watched as another of his soldiers, Private Chang Ho, who collected vintage comic books and always shared his rations with stray dogs, got caught in a crossfire of energy beams. The young man's scream cut through the air for just a moment before he vanished in a burst of white light. Chang Ho had been planning to open a pet shelter after the war ended. Now there would be no after. The Velthrans kept advancing, their crystal faces showing no emotion as they methodically hunted down the last defenders of humanity. They moved like they had all the time in the world, which Minho supposed they did. After 200 years of war, after countless battles across every continent, after humanity had thrown everything they had at these invaders, this was how it ended. Not with some grand final battle, but with a handful of exhausted soldiers, hiding in the rubble of their own world. Jiwoo crawled toward him across the debris-strewn floor, leaving a trail of blood behind her. She had been his communications officer for 5 years, the voice that connected him to command centers that no longer existed. Her equipment was sparking and broken, just like everything else in their makeshift bunker. She had taken shrapnel to her chest when the Velthrans had breached their outer defenses an hour ago. "Sir," she gasped, her voice barely above a whisper. Blood frothed at the corners of her mouth. "The fail-safe." She pressed something small and hard into his palm. Minho looked down to see a data chip, unmarked except for tiny letters that read Project Genesis. "What is this?" he asked, but Jiwoo's eyes were already losing focus. Her breathing became shallow and ragged. "Deep in the archives," she managed to say. "Deeper than anyone knew." Her hand gripped his wrist with surprising strength. "Promise me, you'll use it." Minho nodded, though he had no idea what he was promising. Jiwoo smiled once, then her grip loosened and she was gone. Another friend, another soldier, another human being erased from existence. He gently closed her eyes and tried not to think about how she used to hum old songs while working on radio repairs. The sound of grinding metal filled the air as Veltran soldiers began cutting through the bunker's reinforced doors. Their energy. Weapons cast eerie shadows on the walls, and Minho could hear their alien voices coordinating the final assault. They spoke in harmonious tones that might have been beautiful if they weren't discussing the best ways to kill the last humans on Earth. Minho looked at the data chip again. Project Genesis. He had never heard of it, and he thought he knew about every classified project in the military archives. He had clearance levels that most generals would envy, access to secrets that could start or end wars. But this was something else, something buried so deep that even Supreme Command had never mentioned it in any briefing. The terminal beside him was damaged but still functional. Sparks flew from exposed wires, and the screen flickered with static, but it might work for one last operation. Minho had nothing left to lose. His soldiers were dead or dying, his world was burning, and the enemy was seconds away from breaking through their final barrier. He slammed the chip into the terminal's data port and watched as the screen came alive with symbols he had never seen before. They weren't human writing, but somehow he understood their meaning. Ancient, waiting, ready. The terminal hummed with sudden power, drawing energy from sources that shouldn't have existed. The bunker doors exploded inward, and Velthran soldiers poured through the breach like a crystalline tide. Their weapons were already charging, preparing to deliver the final blow to humanity's last resistance. Minho had maybe 3 seconds before they vaporized him, but something was happening beneath his feet. The floor began to vibrate with a deep thrumming pulse that seemed to come from the very heart of the earth. Emergency lights that had been dark for hours suddenly blazed to life, but they glowed with an impossible blue radiance that made the air itself seem to sing. Minho looked up at the Velthran soldiers, their weapons trained on him, their crystal faces reflecting the strange new light. He thought about Ji Wu and Chang Ho and Sung Wu and all the billions of humans who had died in this endless war. He thought about children who would never grow up, and dreams that would never be fulfilled, and love stories that would never have happy endings. The first Velthran pulled his trigger, and Minho felt the heat of plasma fire rushing toward him. But his last thought wasn't about death or defeat or the end of everything he had ever known. Instead, he smiled and thought, at least the bastards won't get to dance on our graves for long. The blue light erupted from beneath the earth like a sleeping giant finally opening its eyes, and Captain Minho disappeared into history with the satisfied expression of a man who had just played the ultimate trump card. The Velthran mining ships descended like hungry insects onto Earth's wounded surface. 3 days had passed since they had eliminated the last human resistance, and now it was time to claim their prize. Massive drill platforms touched down in what used to be New York, London, and Tokyo. The crystalline invaders moved with efficient purpose, their scanning equipment probing deep into the planet's crust for precious metals and rare elements. Commander Zethkar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the harvest operations begin. His crystalline form pulsed with satisfied colors, blues and purples that indicated contentment among his kind. The war had lasted far longer than expected, but now Earth's riches would fuel Velthran expansion across the galaxy for centuries to come. "Status report," he commanded, his voice carrying the harmonic quality of his species. "All mining operations proceeding smoothly, Commander," replied his lieutenant. "The humans left behind substantial infrastructure we can repurpose. Their cities contained more resources than initially calculated." Zethkar nodded, his crystal face reflecting the lights of the command center. The humans had been surprisingly resilient for such a primitive species, but in the end, superior technology had prevailed. Their final stand in Seoul had been particularly stubborn, but even that had crumbled before Velthran might. The first sign something was wrong came from the seismic monitoring station. Junior Officer Velthar rushed to the commander's side, his crystal body flickering with nervous yellow patterns. "Sir, we're detecting massive underground movements," he reported, his voice pitched higher with anxiety. "The readings are unprecedented." Zethkar moved to examine the data himself. The displays showed seismic activity unlike anything in their geological databases. It wasn't random earthquake activity. The patterns were too organized, too purposeful. Deep beneath every major human city, something was stirring to life. "Equipment malfunction," the commander suggested, though he knew their instruments were flawless. "Negative, sir. Multiple sensors confirm the readings. The activity is increasing in intensity and appears to be synchronized." Before Zethkar could respond, emergency alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The mining platforms on the surface were reporting massive ground ruptures. Through the view screen, he watched as perfect circular openings appeared in the Earth's crust, each one precisely located beneath a former human settlement. From these openings rose structures that defied immediate understanding. They looked like buildings, but their architecture followed principles that hurt to look at directly. Impossible angles, surfaces that seemed to bend light around them, and a deep blue glow that pulsed with the rhythm of a heartbeat. "Commander," Velthar's voice was barely controlled panic now, "something is emerging from the structures." The first figure stepped out of the underground chamber beneath what used to be London. At first glance, it appeared human. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head with familiar features. But as the image resolved, the differences became clear. It moved with a fluid grace that seemed to ignore gravity. Its eyes held depths that spoke of knowledge accumulated over impossibly long periods. When it looked up at the Velthran ships, hovering overhead, its expression was not fear or surprise, but mild irritation. More figures emerged from chambers across the globe. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. Each one carried themselves with the same otherworldly poise, the same ancient awareness. They wore simple clothing that seemed to shift and change color, depending on the angle of observation. Deep beneath, the ruins of Sol, in a chamber that existed in perfect stasis, Guardian Commander Tamin opened his eyes for the first time in 50,000 years. The awakening process was gentle, his enhanced physiology easily transitioning from suspended animation to full consciousness. Around him, crystalline walls pulsed with soft light, and the air hummed with barely contained energy. "Welcome back, Commander," came a familiar voice. Arya, his artificial intelligence companion, materialized as a holographic projection beside his awakening pod. She appeared as a woman in her 30s with kind eyes and an expression of patient concern. "I trust your rest was peaceful." Tamin sat up slowly, his muscles remembering strength that had been dormant for millennia. "Status report, Arya. How? Long? 50,217 years, 4 months and 6 days, Commander. I maintained watch as instructed." He nodded, unsurprised. The Guardians had always been patient. "And our younger siblings, how did humanity progress?" Arya's expression grew somber. "I regret to inform you that the younger siblings have been terminated, Commander. An invasive species calling themselves Velthrans conquered the planet 72 hours ago. They displayed remarkable resistance, but their technology was insufficient." Tamin's eyes darkened with something that wasn't quite anger, but was far more dangerous. "Show me." Holographic displays materialized around them, showing the final battle in vivid detail. Tamin watched Captain Minho's last stand, observed Jiwoo's sacrifice, witnessed the desperate courage of humanity's final defenders. His expression shifted through several emotions: curiosity at human technological development, sadness at their destruction, and finally something that resembled parental pride. "They refused surrender, even facing annihilation," he murmured, watching the replays of humans fighting impossible odds with stubborn determination. "Remarkable. They truly were our successors." "There is an additional matter, Commander," Arya continued. "Uninvited guests are currently rearranging our planetary resources. The Velthrans have begun large-scale mining operations." Tamin stood, his movement fluid and controlled. Around him, the chamber responded to his awakening, systems that had slept for millennia coming online with quiet efficiency. "I see. And how many of our people have awakened?" "Approximately 10,000 Guardians across all continents, with more awakening every minute. The emergency protocols you established have functioned perfectly." "Excellent." Tamin walked to the chamber's viewing portal, looking up through layers of rock and metal to where Velthran ships darkened the sky. "Arya, begin Revival Protocol 7. "Understood, Commander. Shall I activate the teaching subroutines as well?" Tamin smiled, and the expression was both gentle and terrifying. "Indeed. These Velthrans appear to have missed several important lessons about galactic etiquette. It's time for a practical education in proper manners." Above them, the Velthran mining operations continued, unaware that Earth's true guardians had finally awakened from their long sleep. The lesson was about to begin. Commander Tamin stood in the central observation chamber, surrounded by floating holographic displays that showed Earth's current state. The images painted a grim picture: burned cities, poisoned oceans, and skies choked with smoke from 2 centuries of warfare. But his expression remained calm, like a teacher reviewing homework from a particularly challenging class. Arya had been busy during his awakening, compiling everything that had happened to humanity over the past 50,000 years. The data, streams flowed past him in organized sequences: the rise of agriculture, the development of writing, the Industrial Revolution, space exploration, and finally the long war with the Velthrans. "Fascinating," he murmured, pausing the display at footage of human artists working in underground shelters during the war's darkest period. Even while facing extinction, they had continued creating beautiful things. Sculptures made from bomb fragments, paintings depicting hope on canvas made from salvaged materials, music composed on instruments crafted from the wreckage of their world. Guardian scientist So Young materialized beside him, her form shimmering into existence as she teleported from her awakening chamber in what used to be the Amazon basin. Like all Guardians, she possessed an ageless beauty that seemed carved from starlight itself. Her specialty had always been tactical analysis and threat assessment. "Commander," she said, her voice carrying the musical quality of their kind, "I've completed my evaluation of the current invaders. The Velthrans possess crude technology at best, fusion reactors, plasma weapons, basic faster-than-light drives. Nothing we haven't seen from dozens of other species over the millennia." She gestured, and new displays appeared showing detailed scans of Velthran equipment. "Their mining operations are inefficient, their defensive systems are laughably primitive, and their battle tactics follow predictable patterns. Shall we simply eliminate them? I estimate complete removal would take approximately 47 minutes. Taemin shook his head, still watching the replay of Captain Minho's final moments. The human soldier's face showed no fear as plasma fire rushed toward him, only grim satisfaction. "Where's the educational value in that, So Young? Simply destroying these Velthrans teaches them nothing about the consequences of their actions." "Educational value?" So Young raised an eyebrow, a gesture she had learned from observing humans centuries ago. "Commander, they committed genocide against our successors. They've turned our carefully maintained world into a strip mine. Surely some crimes deserve immediate punishment?" "Indeed they do," Taemin agreed, his tone growing colder. "But punishment, without understanding, creates martyrs, not better behavior. These Velthrans need to comprehend exactly what they've done and why it was wrong. A quick death teaches them nothing." He turned to face the displays showing current Velthran operations. Their massive mining platforms were tearing chunks out of Earth's crust with mechanical efficiency. Ore refineries pumped toxic waste into the atmosphere, and their transport ships carried away precious metals that had taken millions of years to form. "Arya," he called out, "begin activation of the planetary defense grid. Let's start with something simple, a basic physics lesson." "Understood." "Commander, shall I use the standard educational protocols?" "Modified for maximum learning impact," Taemin replied with a smile that would have made the Velthrans very nervous if they could see it. "Begin with the mining operations in North America. Deep beneath Earth's surface, systems that had been dormant for 50 millennia stirred to life. The planet itself had been the Guardians' greatest work of engineering, not just a world, but a vast machine designed to nurture and protect developing civilizations. Every mountain, every ocean, every tectonic plate was part of an integrated defense network that made the Death Star look like a child's toy. The first lesson began at Mining Platform 7, currently extracting rare earth elements from what used to be the Colorado Rockies. Velthran workers operated massive extraction drills, their crystalline forms coordinating efficiently as they stripped away layers of rock and soil. Without warning, gravity around the platform began behaving strangely. The mining equipment, which weighed several thousand tons, suddenly became as light as feathers. Drill bits floated away from their targets, ore containers drifted into the sky like balloons, and Velthran workers found themselves spinning helplessly in mid-air. Then the gravity reversed itself, becoming 10 times stronger than normal. The floating equipment came crashing down, but instead of destroying the platform, it compressed and folded into impossible shapes. Mining drills became twisted metal sculptures, ore refineries transformed into geometric art installations, and transport vehicles were squeezed into perfect spheres. Commander Zeth Kar received the first panicked reports from his flagship's bridge. "Sir, Mining Platform 7 has stopped responding. Visual scans show—" "I'm not sure how to describe this, sir. Their equipment appears to have been turned into modern art." Similar reports began flooding in from operations across the globe. At Platform 12 in Australia, atmospheric processors had begun malfunctioning in the most peculiar way. Instead of filtering the air for Velthran physiology, they were pumping out nitrogen-oxygen mixtures that made breathing possible but had an unexpected side effect. Velthran work crews found their voices becoming high-pitched and squeaky, like they had been inhaling helium. Orders barked out in commanding tones became ridiculous squeaks that made serious communication impossible. The entire mining operation devolved into unintentional comedy as crystal beings tried to maintain military discipline while sounding like cartoon characters. "This is Platform 12 reporting," came a transmission that made the bridge crew struggle not to laugh. The voice was so high-pitched it barely registered on their audio equipment. "We're experiencing technical difficulties. Our atmospheric systems appear to be compromised." But the most unsettling development came from the automated defense drones that had begun appearing over every continent. These weren't the crude machines humanity had built. They moved with liquid grace and seemed to be made from materials that shifted between states of matter. They didn't attack the Velthran positions directly. Instead, they began collecting the wreckage from the malfunctioning equipment. Working with artistic precision, the drones arranged pieces of destroyed mining gear into enormous letters across Earth's surface. When viewed from orbit, the message was impossible to miss. "Trespassers will be educated," spelled out in twisted metal across 3 continents, each letter several miles high. Guardian So Young watched the Velthran reactions with growing amusement. "Commander, their stress levels are spiking across all monitored frequencies. I believe they're beginning to understand that something is very wrong." Taemin nodded, still focused on the displays showing human history. He had reached the part where children drew pictures of better tomorrows on the walls of bomb shelters, where scientists worked to cure diseases even as their laboratories crumbled around them, where ordinary people risked everything to save strangers they had never met. "The humans were remarkable, weren't they?" he said quietly. "Flawed, certainly. Violent often. But they never stopped hoping, never stopped trying to build something better. Even in their final moments, they chose courage over despair." "Indeed," So Young agreed, "their final stand showed remarkable spirit. But, Commander, the Velthrans have just launched a full-scale investigation into these equipment failures. They're beginning to suspect organized resistance." "Good," Taemin replied, finally turning away from the human historical records. "Fear is the beginning of wisdom. Let them investigate. Let them discover that Earth wasn't some undefended backwater world they could simply conquer and consume." He gestured, and the displays changed to show Velthran High Command frantically trying to understand what was happening to their invasion force. Their most advanced sensors detected no enemy activity, no hidden human resistance, no explanation for the systematic failure of their equipment. "They treated our world like a convenience store they could rob at will," Taemin continued. "Now they're learning that this was never an orphaned planet. It was a protected nursery, watched over by guardians who consider interstellar travel as casual as taking a morning walk." The lesson was just beginning, and the Velthrans were about to discover that some educations come with a very heavy price. Commander Zeth-Kar stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the tactical displays with growing horror. In the past 6 hours, 70% of his mining operations had been reduced to abstract art installations. His communication officers reported that half their ground crews now sounded like squeaky toys. And somewhere on Earth's surface, massive letters made from their own destroyed equipment spelled out threats that chilled his crystalline core. "Sir?" his tactical officer Velthar reported, his voice trembling with frequencies that indicated extreme stress among their kind. "Long-range sensors are detecting an energy signature approaching our position. It's not using any propulsion system we can identify." Zeth-Kar turned toward the main view screen, expecting to see some primitive human spacecraft limping toward them for a final desperate attack. Instead, he saw something that made his crystal structure ring with disbelief. A humanoid figure was simply walking through the vacuum of space, moving toward their flagship with casual, unhurried steps. "Impossible," Zeth-Kar whispered. "No organic being can survive unprotected in space." The figure continued its approach, seemingly unbothered by the lack of atmosphere, the deadly radiation, or the crushing cold of the void. As it drew closer, Zethkar could see it appeared to be a human male, tall and graceful, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to hold depths of knowledge that hurt to look at directly. "Sir, should we fire on the approaching target?" Velthar asked, though his voice suggested he already suspected their weapons would be useless. "All batteries, open fire," Zethkar commanded, more from desperation than tactical sense. The flagship's main plasma cannons swiveled toward the approaching figure and unleashed volleys of superheated energy that could vaporize asteroids. The beams struck their target dead on, creating brilliant explosions of light and force. When the energy dissipated, the figure continued walking toward them, completely unharmed. He hadn't even broken stride. The bridge crew watched in stunned silence as the being approached their outer defensive shields, energy barriers so powerful they could deflect meteor impacts and withstand direct nuclear strikes. The figure reached out with one hand and touched the barrier's surface. The impenetrable shield simply dissolved like morning mist touched by sunlight. Commander Taemin stepped through the hull of the Veltran flagship as if the reinforced metal were nothing, more than a holographic projection. Emergency alarms blared throughout the ship as atmospheric containment fields automatically sealed the breach, but the intruder was already inside, standing calmly in the main corridor. Velthran security forces converged on his position within seconds, their plasma rifles charged and ready. They opened fire without hesitation, filling the corridor with deadly energy beams. Taemin raised his hands, and the plasma bolts simply stopped in mid-air, hanging suspended like glowing ornaments. With a casual gesture, he redirected the energy, harmlessly into the ship's walls, where it dissipated as gentle warmth. "Fascinating," he said, his voice carrying easily through the ship's communication systems. "Your weapons technology hasn't advanced much since the last time we encountered your species. That was, about 8,000 years ago, I believe." The security team backed away in terror, their crystalline forms flickering with colors. That indicated absolute panic. Taemin walked past them with polite nods, following the ship's layout toward the bridge, with the confidence of someone who had memorized the vessel's blueprints simply by observing it from the outside. When the bridge doors slid open, revealing the flagship's command center, every Velthran present turned to stare at the impossible intruder. Taemin stepped into the room with the bearing of a professor entering a classroom, his hands clasped behind his back and his expression mildly curious. "Good afternoon," he said pleasantly, as if he were greeting neighbors at a garden party. "I am Commander Taemin of the Guardian Corps. Please don't be alarmed by my unscheduled visit. I'm here to discuss your recent activities on Earth." Zethkar's crystal body began resonating with harmonic frequencies of pure terror. You walked through space, through our shields, through our hull. That's impossible for any known species." "Ah, but your knowledge appears to have some significant gaps," Taemin replied with a gentle smile. "Earth has been under Guardian protection for millennia. Consider this an overdue lesson in galactic law and proper etiquette." Before anyone could respond, another figure materialized on the bridge, literally appeared out of thin air with a soft shimmer of displaced light. Guardian Hyejin stepped forward, her appearance causing several Velthran officers to stumble backward in shock. She was stunningly beautiful in the way that dangerous things often are, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to contain swirling galaxies. "Commander," she said to Taemin with a slight bow, "I've taken the liberty of examining their weapons systems. Quite primitive, really. Shall I demonstrate?" Without waiting for an answer, Hyejin gestured toward the bridge's tactical displays. Every weapon system throughout the entire Velthran fleet suddenly began behaving in impossible ways. Plasma cannons started shooting beams of harmless colored light that painted pretty patterns across space. Missile launchers began firing projectiles that exploded into brilliant fireworks displays. Energy shields transformed into decorative light shows that pulsed in rhythm with classical music. "Your species appears to have skipped several crucial chapters in basic galactic etiquette," Hyejin observed, watching the displays with the detached interest of a scientist studying interesting specimens. Chapter 7 specifically covers the topic of developmental preserves and protected worlds. Zethkar felt his crystal structure beginning to develop stress fractures. a physical manifestation of fear so intense it caused literal damage to Velthran physiology. Around him, his officers were experiencing similar reactions, their bodies ringing with harmonic frequencies of pure terror. "This is impossible," he whispered. "Our databases showed this system as unprotected, a minor world with primitive inhabitants, and no significant defenses." Taemin nodded sympathetically. "I can understand the confusion. We've always preferred to remain unnoticed, allowing younger species to develop naturally without interference. Think of us as cosmic park rangers, maintaining a preserve for emerging civilizations." "But the humans," Zethkar protested desperately. "They were primitive. Their technology was crude. They couldn't even achieve faster-than-light travel without external assistance." "Indeed," Taemin agreed. "They were our successors, carefully guided and protected, while they learned to walk among the stars. We've been watching over them for 50,000 years, nurturing their growth, celebrating their achievements, mourning their failures." His expression darkened slightly. "And now you've destroyed them, wiped out an entire species that we considered our children. Do you begin to understand the magnitude of your error?" The realization hit the Velthran command crew like a physical blow. They hadn't conquered some backwater planet, defended by primitive humans. They had invaded a nursery school under the protection of beings who manipulated matter at the quantum level for casual entertainment, who treated interstellar travel like taking a walk to the corner store. "Please," Zethkar begged, his voice breaking into harmonic fragments as his crystal structure continued cracking under stress. "We didn't know. If we had realized, we never would have." "Clearly your research skills need substantial improvement," Taemin interrupted gently. "Fortunately, we Guardians believe strongly in comprehensive education. By the time we're finished with your species, you'll have a much better understanding of galactic law, proper conduct, and the consequences of genocide." Ye Jin smiled, and the expression was both beautiful and terrifying. "Class is now in session. I hope you're prepared for a very thorough curriculum." The Velthran High Command realized they were no longer conquerors. They had become students in a school where failure carried consequences beyond their worst nightmares. The Velthran fleet hung motionless in Earth's orbit, their weapons transformed into harmless light shows that painted the darkness with colors no human artist had ever imagined. Inside the Guardian Command Center, Commander Taemin stood before a wall of holographic displays showing the aftermath of their intervention. The invasion had been stopped, the invaders neutralized, and Earth was safe once again. But the victory felt hollow. Guardian Specialist Do Hyun materialized beside him, her expression carrying the weight of an uncomfortable truth. "Commander, we've completed our assessment of the planetary damage. The Velthran mining operations can be reversed, the atmosphere can be cleansed, and the oceans can be restored to their former purity. Earth will heal." "And the humans?" Taemin asked quietly, though he already knew the answer. "Gone," Do Hyun replied with genuine sadness. "Every last one. We monitored the final battles across 17 different continents. They fought with remarkable courage until the very end, but their technology simply wasn't sufficient to overcome Velthran numerical superiority." Taemin nodded, still watching footage of humanity's last stand. Captain Min Ho's final moments played on repeat, the young soldier's face showing no fear, only grim determination as he activated the unknown device that had awakened the Guardians. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Humanity's death had become the key to their own salvation. They earned something precious in those final days, Taemin observed. They proved themselves worthy successors, even in defeat. Their refusal to surrender, their willingness to sacrifice everything for ideals they believed in. That kind of courage is rare in the galaxy. Arya's holographic form shimmered into existence between them, her artificial intelligence processing data streams that would have overwhelmed organic minds. "Commander, I have a proposal that may interest you. It's unconventional." "Speak freely, Arya." "We could resurrect the human species," she said simply. "Our bioreconstruction technology can rebuild their bodies from genetic samples preserved in Guardian archives. But we could do more than simple resurrection. We could enhance them, creating a true synthesis of both bloodlines, human creativity and Guardian wisdom combined." Du Hyun's eyes widened. Arya, that's never been attempted on such a scale, merging two distinct evolutionary paths. The risks could be enormous. The risks of not trying are greater, Arya countered. Humanity demonstrated qualities that even we Guardians have lost over the millennia. Their capacity for hope in impossible circumstances, their ability to innovate under pressure, their stubborn refusal to accept defeat. These traits, combined with Guardian knowledge and longevity, could create something unprecedented. Taemin considered the proposal carefully. In 50,000 years of existence, the Guardians had never attempted to recreate an extinct species, let alone enhance them with their own genetic heritage. It would be the ultimate act of adoption, taking humanity's children and making them literally part of the Guardian family. Begin preparations, he decided. But we start small. Resurrect their final defenders first, the ones who earned this. Second chance through their courage. Let them choose whether to accept this gift. 3 days later, Captain Minho opened his eyes in a resurrection chamber deep beneath Seoul. The first thing he noticed was that his body felt different, stronger, more resilient, filled with energy that seemed to flow from some inexhaustible source. The second thing he noticed was the impossibly beautiful woman standing beside his recovery bed, watching him with ancient eyes full of kindness. "Welcome back, Captain," Guardian Specialist Do Hyun said gently. "I know this must be confusing. You died heroically defending your world. We've brought you back, but with some improvements." Minho sat up slowly, marveling at how effortless the movement felt. His memories were intact. The final battle, Ji-Woo's sacrifice, the strange blue light that had erupted from beneath the earth. "The Velthrans?" "Defeated," Do Hyun assured him, though educated might be a more accurate term. "You activated an emergency beacon that awakened Earth's true guardians. We've been protecting this world for 50 millennia, watching over humanity's development. And the others, my soldiers. Being resurrected as we speak, all of humanity's final defenders are being given this second chance. But Captain, there's something you need to understand. You're not entirely human anymore. We've enhanced your species with Guardian genetic memories, Guardian longevity, Guardian abilities. Think of it as graduation with honors." Minho looked at his hands, noticing how they seemed to shimmer slightly in the chamber's light. Information flowed through his mind, not his own memories, but inherited knowledge from beings who had watched civilizations rise and fall across the galaxy. He could feel new capabilities awakening within him, powers that would have seemed like magic just days ago. "What's my purpose now?" he asked. "What do you need from us?" "Actually," Do Hyun smiled, "we need you to teach us. Humanity's courage in the face of extinction reminded us of qualities we'd forgotten over the millennia. We're making you Earth's first integration coordinator, responsible for helping other resurrected humans adapt to their new abilities while maintaining their essential humanity." Over the following months, more humans awakened in resurrection chambers across the globe. Scientists, artists, teachers, children, representatives of every aspect of human civilization returned to life with Guardian enhancements. The process wasn't without challenges. Some struggled with the vast knowledge now available to them, while others found it difficult to control their new abilities. Minho worked tirelessly to help them adjust. He established training centers where resurrected humans could learn to manage their enhanced capabilities. More importantly, he insisted on preserving human culture, human values, and human dreams. The new hybrid species would be more than human, but they would never be less than human. The Velthrans, meanwhile, found themselves enrolled in what could only be described as the galaxy's most comprehensive remedial education program. Commander Zethkar and his forces were assigned to help rebuild everything they had destroyed, working under Guardian supervision to restore Earth's damaged ecosystems. "Consider it community service," Guardian Hyojin explained to the mortified Velthran. "Commander, 1,000 years should be sufficient to teach you proper galactic citizenship. Think of it as earning your PhD in how not to commit genocide." The Velthrans discovered that Guardian punishment was both more creative and more thorough than simple destruction. They were required to study the histories of every species, they had conquered, to understand the cultures they had destroyed, and to make amends wherever possible. Many found the experience transformative, gradually developing the empathy and wisdom that had been lacking in their society. Years passed. The hybrid human-guardian civilization flourished beyond even Arya's optimistic projections. They combined guardian technology with human innovation, guardian patience with human passion, guardian wisdom with human hope. Earth became a beacon of possibility, proof that different species could not only coexist, but create something greater than the sum of their parts. In his final log entry, Commander Taemin reflected on the lessons learned from humanity's resurrection. Note to future generations: proper succession planning requires both wisdom and courage. We Guardians possessed the former in abundance, but we had forgotten the power of the latter. Humanity demonstrated courage beautifully, even in their darkest hour. Perhaps that's the most important lesson of all, that hope and stubborn determination can triumph over impossible odds, that love for one's people can transcend death itself, and that sometimes the greatest victory comes not from avoiding defeat, but from choosing how to face it with dignity. He paused, watching through the observation deck as human children played in gardens that had been wastelands just months before. They ran and laughed with guardian young, their laughter carrying notes of both species' music. "The humans are gone," he continued, "but they are not lost. They live on in their children, who are also our children now. In their courage, we found our forgotten strength. In their hope, we remembered our purpose. And in their stubborn refusal to surrender, we discovered the most powerful force in the universe, the determination to create something beautiful from the ashes of despair." The integration was complete. Earth's children had graduated to become something new, something unprecedented, something wonderful. The universe watched with interest as this hybrid species began to explore the galaxy, carrying with them both the wisdom of ages and the unquenchable human spirit that refused to accept that anything was truly impossible. The lesson was finished. The students had become the teachers, and somewhere in the quantum foam between dimensions, the original humans smiled.